Marcus Chun had been alone on Kepler 442b for 873 days when a knock came. He knew the exact count because he carved a line into the metal wall of his shelter every morning, right after checking the atmosphere processors and before his daily walk to the crashed remains of the transport ship Meridian. The planet was supposed to be humanity's new frontier. The advanced team had sent back promising reports about breathable atmosphere, fertile soil, and abundant water sources. What they hadn't mentioned was the complete absence of any life beyond simple microorganisms. No plants, no animals, no insects, nothing but endless gray plains stretching to horizons that never seemed to change. Marcus had been part of the second wave, a geologist tasked with mapping mineral deposits for the planned colony. The Meridian carried 47 people, enough to establish the first permanent settlement. They never made it that far. The ship's AI had detected an anomaly during the final approach, some kind of electromagnetic disturbance in the upper atmosphere. Captain Rodriguez ordered an emergency landing, but the interference scrambled their navigation systems. The Meridian came down hard in a barren valley, her hull cracking like an eggshell against the unforgiving ground. Marcus survived because he was in the geology lab, located in the ship's most reinforced section. When he crawled out of the wreckage 3 days later, he found himself the sole survivor of humanity's second attempt to colonize this world. The others had died on impact or succumbed to injuries in the hours that followed. He spent the first month in a haze of grief and desperation, talking to the bodies until the smell became unbearable. Then came anger at the mission planners, at the faulty equipment, at the universe itself for stranding him on this dead rock. Eventually, even the anger faded, replaced by a hollow routine that kept him sane. Every morning, he checked the shelter systems. Solar panels still functioned despite the planet's weak sun. The water reclamation unit hummed along efficiently. Food supplies would last another 2 years if he was careful. The emergency beacon transmitted continuously, though no rescue ship would arrive for at least a decade, if ever. His daily walks served multiple purposes. Exercise prevented muscle atrophy. Exploration gave him hope of finding something, anything, that might change his situation. Most importantly, the routine kept his mind occupied. The alternative was madness. The landscape never changed. Gray soil crunched beneath his boots. The pale sky showed no clouds, no birds, no movement of any kind. Hills rolled away in every direction, identical and lifeless. Sometimes he imagined he saw movement in his peripheral vision, but it was always just shadows or wishful thinking. Marcus had stopped believing in rescue after the first year. Earth was 47 light years away. Even if they received his distress signal immediately, organizing a rescue mission would take decades. He was going to die here, alone, forgotten by a species that would never know how badly their grand adventure had failed. He had made peace with that reality. The anger and desperation were gone, replaced by a strange sort of acceptance. Death would come eventually, equipment failure, medical emergency, or simple old age. Until then, he would maintain his routine, keep the beacon running, and try to leave some record of what happened for whoever might eventually find this place. The knock changed everything. It came at sunset on day 873, just as Marcus finished his evening meal of reconstituted protein and vitamin supplements. 3 sharp raps on the shelter's outer door, unmistakably deliberate, and clearly produced by something intelligent. His fork clattered to the floor. For a moment, he wondered if isolation had finally driven him over the edge into full hallucination. But the sound had been real, metallic, purposeful, impossible. Marcus grabbed the plasma torch from his toolkit and approached the door with shaking hands. The shelter had no windows, no way to see outside without opening the airlock. His heart hammered against his ribs as he activated the door's external camera. 3 figures stood outside his shelter. They were tall, nearly 7 feet each, with lean builds that suggested both strength and grace. Their skin was pale blue-white, like moonlight on snow, and completely hairless. Large, dark eyes dominated angular faces that seemed almost human, but for their proportions. They wore fitted clothing that looked like it was made from some kind of metallic fabric, and each carried what appeared to be a weapon, though the designs were unlike anything from Earth. The figures stood perfectly still, waiting. The one in the center held something in her hands. Marcus could see now that they were female, though their anatomy was different from human women. What she carried looked like a bundle wrapped in dark cloth. One of them raised a hand and knocked again. Same rhythm, same deliberate pattern. Marcus stared at the display screen, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Intelligent life. After more than 2 years of absolute solitude on a world that seemed utterly dead, 3 alien beings stood at his door as casually as neighbors stopping by for a chat. His hands trembled as he reached for the airlock controls. Every instinct screamed warnings. He knew nothing about these creatures, their intentions, or their capabilities. They were armed, clearly technologically advanced, and he was completely defenseless. But after 873 days of crushing loneliness, the prospect of contact with intelligent beings overrode every other consideration. Even if they killed him, at least his last moments wouldn't be spent in isolation. Marcus activated the external speakers. His voice cracked from disuse despite his daily habit of talking to himself. I can hear you. I'm human. Do you understand me? The 3 figures turned to look at each other. Their mouths moved, but no sound came through the speakers. After a moment, the center figure stepped closer to the door. When she spoke, her voice was melodious, but carried an accent unlike anything Marcus had ever heard. We understand. We bring what belongs to you. She lifted the bundle slightly. May we enter your dwelling? Marcus's finger hovered over the airlock control. Everything about this situation felt surreal. After 2.5 years of believing he was the only intelligent being on this planet, 3 aliens had appeared at his door, carrying something they claimed belonged to him. What is it? What belongs to me? The alien's large eyes seemed to soften slightly. Your offspring. We return them to you as honor demands. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Offspring. Children. Impossible. He had no children, had never even been in a serious relationship back on Earth. But the alien's tone carried absolute certainty. His hand moved without conscious thought, triggering the airlock cycle. Whatever was happening here, whatever these beings wanted, he had to know. After so much time alone, any contact was worth the risk. The outer door slid open, and the 3 aliens stepped into the airlock chamber. They moved with fluid grace, their weapons held in relaxed, but ready positions. The bundle in the center figure's arms shifted slightly, and Marcus heard something that made his heart stop. A soft, unmistakably human cry. The inner door opened, and Marcus found himself face to face with beings from another world. Up close, they were even more imposing, tall, elegant, and clearly dangerous despite their calm demeanor. But his attention was fixed on the bundle. The center alien extended her arms, offering him the wrapped package. These are yours, she said simply. With shaking hands, Marcus accepted the bundle. It was heavier than he expected and warm. He pulled back a corner of the dark fabric and gasped. 2 small faces looked up at him. Human faces, unmistakably infant, with dark hair and eyes that seemed far too alert for newborns. They were perfect, beautiful, and absolutely impossible. I don't understand, Marcus whispered, cradling the babies against his chest. These can't be mine. I've been alone here for over 2 years. There's no way. The alien who had handed him the children, the leader, he assumed, inclined her head slightly. You are mistaken about your solitude, Marcus Chun of Earth. We've been watching you since the day your sky vessel fell. We know your name, your nature, your worthiness. Marcus's legs gave out, and he sank into his chair, still holding the impossibly real children. Watching me? From where? This planet is dead. I've explored for hundreds of miles in every direction. This world is not dead, the alien replied. It sleeps, waiting for the right catalyst to wake. We are its guardians, the Ashari, and we have waited long for one, such as you, to arrive. The other 2 aliens remained silent, but Their weapons were no longer relaxed. Marcus got the impression they were guarding against something, though what threat could exist in this empty place? I still don't understand about the children. They're human, but how? The leader's expression grew complicated, mixing what might have been sadness with something like respect. Your species fascinates us, Marcus Chun. In all our watching of the galaxy's peoples, we have never encountered beings quite like humans. Your determination in the face of impossible odds, your refusal to surrender hope even when hope seems foolish, these qualities are rare and precious. She gestured toward the babies in his arms. When we saw how you endured alone, how you maintained your routines, and your sanity despite crushing isolation, we knew you possessed the strength our people value above all else. You proved worthy of the greatest gift we can offer. Marcus looked down at the children again. They were so real, so perfectly human. But the implications of what the alien was saying made his head spin. You made them? Created human children somehow. We are skilled in the arts of life, she replied. Your genetic patterns were borrowed during your explorations. We crafted these young ones in your image, carrying your strength and your potential. They are yours in every way that matters. The casual admission that they had been taking biological samples without his knowledge should have terrified him. Instead, Marcus felt an overwhelming surge of protectiveness for the tiny beings in his arms. However, they had come to exist. They were here now, helpless and dependent on him. Why, he asked. Why do this? The alien leader stepped closer, her dark eyes intense. Because what comes next will require someone with human stubbornness to survive. This world will wake soon, and when it does, everything will change. These children will need a father who knows how to endure, how to adapt, how to refuse defeat even when all seems lost. As if to emphasize her words, a low rumble shook the shelter. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the lights flickered. Outside, Marcus could hear a sound like distant thunder, except it went on, growing louder instead of fading. It begins, the alien said, and, for the first time, her calm demeanor showed cracks of something that might have been fear. The world wakes, and all who dwell upon it must be ready. The rumbling grew stronger, and Marcus watched in amazement as cracks appeared in the gray ground outside his shelter. Through the viewing port, he could see lines of brilliant blue light emerging from the fissures, painting the perpetually dull landscape in electric hues he had never imagined possible on this dead world. What's happening? Marcus asked, instinctively holding the babies closer to his chest. They had fallen asleep in his arms, somehow calm despite the chaos beginning around them. The Ashari leader, who had introduced herself as Veltar, moved to the window with fluid grace. Her two companions flanked the door, weapons ready but not aimed at Marcus. Their vigilance suggested they expected threats from outside, rather than from the human holding impossible children. This world is not natural, Veltar explained, her melodious voice carrying easily over the growing noise. Long ago, our ancestors constructed it as a testing ground, a place where worthy species could prove their value. For millennia, it has waited, monitoring the galaxy for those who possess the qualities necessary for survival in what is to come. Another shock wave shook the shelter. The blue light outside was spreading, turning the gray soil into something that looked almost organic. Marcus could swear he saw shapes moving beneath the surface, vast forms stirring after eons of sleep. Testing ground for what? Marcus managed to ask, though his attention was split between Veltar's words and the impossible transformation happening outside. The Great Hunt, one of the other Ashari replied. She was smaller than Veltar, but carried herself with the same deadly grace. Every 1,000 cycles, the barriers between worlds grow thin. The devourers wake from their slumber and seek fresh hunting grounds. This time, they have chosen your galaxy. Marcus felt cold despite the shelter's steady temperature. The babies in his arms stirred but remained asleep, as if some instinct told them to conserve energy for what was coming. The devourers are ancient beyond your comprehension, Veltar continued, her eyes fixed on the transforming landscape. They have consumed entire galactic clusters, leaving nothing but empty space where billions of worlds once thrived. They are perfect predators, intelligent, adaptable, and utterly without mercy. The ground outside had completely changed. What had been barren soil was now a carpet of something that looked like luminescent coral, pulsing with that same blue light. Structures were rising from the transformed surface, crystalline spires that grew like time-lapse flowers, reaching toward the pale sky. But they have a weakness, Veltar said, turning back to Marcus. They have never encountered anything quite like humanity. Your species' refusal to accept defeat, your ability to find hope in hopeless situations, your talent for adaptation. These traits confuse them. You represent something they have never successfully hunted. Marcus watched in fascination as one of the crystal spires completed its growth near his shelter. It stood nearly 100 feet tall, its surface covered in patterns that seemed to shift and change as he watched. Similar structures were rising across the visible landscape, transforming the dead world into something alive and alien. So this is all some kind of elaborate trap? Marcus asked. The advanced team's reports, the colony mission, bringing humans here? No, Veltar replied, and her tone carried what sounded like regret. Your people discovered this world naturally. The reports they sent were accurate as far as they went. We simply ensured they could not detect our presence or the world's true nature. When the Devourers arrive, they will expect to find easy prey. Instead, they will face something unprecedented. The third Ashari, who had remained silent until now, made a sharp gesture. Through the shelter's reinforced walls, Marcus could hear new sounds, not the rumbling of the world's transformation, but something else, a rhythmic thumping, like massive footsteps or machinery in motion. They come sooner than expected, Veltar said, her calm facade cracking to reveal something that might have been excitement or fear. The barriers weaken ahead of schedule. We must move quickly. She turned to Marcus with an intensity that made him acutely aware of how alien she truly was. The children you hold are more than they appear. Their genetics carry modifications, enhancements that will allow them to interface with this world's systems when they mature. They will be able to command the defenses we have built, to coordinate resistance against the Devourers in ways no pure-blooded human could achieve. Marcus looked down at the sleeping infants. They seemed so fragile, so completely helpless. The idea that they were somehow key to a galactic war seemed absurd. They're babies, he protested. Even if what you're saying is true, they won't be able to do anything useful for years. Time moves differently when worlds awaken, Veltar replied cryptically. And you underestimate human potential. These children carry your stubbornness, your refusal to surrender. Combined with our enhancements, they will grow into something remarkable. The thumping sounds outside were getting closer. Through the window, Marcus could see shapes moving between the crystal spires, massive forms that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved with purpose, converging on a shelter. The Devourer's scouts, the smaller Ashari said, raising her weapon. The main force cannot be far behind. Veltar moved with sudden urgency, pulling a device from her belt that looked like a cross between a communicator and a weapon. Marcus-chun, you must choose now. Stay here with the children and face the scouts with whatever defenses this shelter provides, or come with us to the Nexus where you can learn to use this world's true capabilities. The Nexus, the heart of this world's defensive network, a fortress designed to coordinate resistance against exactly this kind of invasion. But reaching it means leaving the safety of your shelter and crossing terrain now controlled by scout forces. Marcus looked around the small space that had been his home for over 2 years. The walls that had protected him from isolation and despair suddenly seemed pitifully thin. Outside, shapes moved with predatory purpose, and the transformed landscape pulsed with alien energies he couldn't begin to understand. The babies in his arms shifted slightly, one of them opening dark eyes to look up at him. For a moment, Marcus could have sworn he saw something ancient and knowing in that gaze, as if the child understood far more than any infant should. "If I stay here, what happens to them?" he asked, nodding toward the children. "The scouts will sense their enhanced genetics within hours," Veltar replied bluntly. "They will come for them specifically. Your shelter's defenses might hold for a short time, but eventually you will be overwhelmed." Another impact shook the building, stronger than before. Dust rained from the ceiling, and several system alarms began chirping warnings. Through the window, Marcus could see one of the dark shapes investigating the shelter's exterior, its movements predatory and intelligent. "And if I go with you, you will have a chance to learn what you and the children are truly capable of. The Nexus contains archives of human psychology and behavior gathered from centuries of observation. You will understand why your species was chosen, why these children were created, and how you might help coordinate a defense that could save not just this world, but your entire galaxy." The decision should have been impossible. Leave the only safe space he had known for years to venture into an alien landscape filled with hostile creatures, carrying two infants who might or might not be the key to some cosmic war. Everything rational told him to stay put and hope for the best. But Marcus had spent 873 days learning that survival often required choosing the least rational option. Sometimes hope meant accepting impossible odds and moving forward anyway. "How do we get there?" he asked. Veltar's expression brightened with something that might have been relief or approval. "The crystal structures are more than decorative. They form a transportation network that can move us across the planet's surface in minutes. But the journey will be dangerous. The scouts are adapting to this world-awakened state faster than we anticipated." She gestured to one of her companions, who produced what looked like a portable cradle made from the same metallic fabric as their clothing. "This will protect the children during transport and provide life support if needed. The Nexus has facilities designed for human habitation, but the journey there will test everything you have learned about endurance." Marcus looked down at the babies one more time. They had been thrust into his care by beings he didn't fully trust, in circumstances he couldn't completely understand. But they were his responsibility now, and his first priority was keeping them safe. "What I need to do?" The smaller Ashari was already at the shelter's control panel, her fingers moving over the interface with impossible speed. "Gathering your survival supplies," she said without looking back. "The Nexus journey will take several hours, even with the transport network. We cannot risk being caught without resources." "I'll need to shut down the beacon," Marcus realized. "If there's even a small chance of rescue from Earth." "Your people will know what happened here," Veltar assured him. "When this is over, survivors will carry word of what transpired to every inhabited world in the galaxy. Earth will learn that humanity played a crucial role in the defense against the Devourers." Another impact, stronger still. This time, Marcus could hear something scraping against the shelter's outer hull, something large and deliberate, testing for weaknesses. "Decide quickly," the third Ashari said urgently. "The scouts have found our scent. They will breach the shelter within minutes." Marcus moved quickly, gathering the few items he couldn't afford to lose: his emergency medical kit, the remaining food supplies, and the data tablet containing his geological surveys and personal logs. Everything else would have to be left behind. As he worked, he found himself thinking about the absurdity of his situation. 2.5 years ago, he had been a simple geologist looking forward to mapping mineral deposits on humanity's newest colony. Now he was preparing to flee across an alien landscape with 2 genetically modified babies and 3 warrior aliens to reach a fortress designed to coordinate defense against cosmic predators. If anyone had suggested such a scenario back on Earth, he would have recommended psychiatric evaluation. But the babies in the makeshift cradle were real. The sounds of massive creatures outside were real. The transformed world beyond his walls was undeniably real, no matter how impossible it all seemed. "Ready," he announced, slinging his pack over one shoulder and carefully lifting the cradle containing the children. Veltar nodded approvingly. Stay close to us once we leave the shelter. The crystal network will transport us, but we must reach the first node without being intercepted. If we become separated, follow the blue lights toward the largest spire cluster. That will lead you toward the nexus. She activated her weapon, and it hummed to life with dangerous energy. Her companions did the same, their movements coordinated with the precision of a military unit. One more thing, Marcus Chun, Veltar said as they prepare to leave. Do not trust your human instincts about what is possible once we reach the nexus. This world will challenge everything you think you know about reality, physics, and your own capabilities. The children especially will demonstrate abilities that seem impossible. Accept what you see rather than questioning it. Marcus nodded, though privately he wondered how many more impossible things he could accept before his sanity cracked completely. The scraping sounds outside had grown more aggressive. Whatever was investigating his shelter had apparently found something interesting. Now, Veltar said, triggering the airlock cycle. The outer door opened, and Marcus got his first clear look at one of the Devourer's scouts. It was Nightmare made manifest, a creature that seemed to be composed of living shadow, given substance, and malevolent intelligence. Roughly humanoid in shape, but twice the size of any human, it moved with predatory grace that spoke of perfect adaptation for hunting. Where its face should have been, Marcus saw only darkness that seemed to absorb light itself. The creature turned toward the opening airlock with interest that felt almost personal. Then Veltar's weapon fired, and the night erupted in brilliant energy and in human screams. The energy blast from Veltar's weapon struck the shadow creature's center mass, and for a moment the thing seemed to pause, as if surprised that anything could cause it pain. Then it let out a sound that was part shriek, part roar, and something else entirely, something that made Marcus's teeth ache and his vision blur. "Move!" Veltar shouted, already sprinting toward the nearest crystal spire. Her companions flanked Marcus, their weapons tracking other shapes that were emerging from between the alien structures. Marcus ran, clutching the cradle containing the babies against his chest. The transformed ground beneath his feet felt strange, not quite solid, but not liquid either. It seemed to respond to his footsteps, providing more traction than the gray soil he had walked on for over 2 years. Behind them, more of the shadow creatures were converging on his abandoned shelter. They moved with terrifying coordination, some pursuing while others began systematically dismantling the structure he had called home. Marcus could hear metal tearing and systems failing as they searched for something. "They want the genetic traces you left behind," one of Veltar's companions called out, her weapon firing controlled bursts at creatures trying to flank them. Evidence of what the children are, and where they might be found. The crystal spire loomed ahead of them, easily 40 feet in diameter and covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change as Marcus watched. Up close, he could see that its surface wasn't solid. Patterns of light moved beneath the crystal like data flowing through fiber optic cables. Veltar reached the base of the structure first and pressed her palm against a section of the crystal wall. Immediately, the symbols began glowing brighter, and a section of the spire became transparent, revealing an interior space that looked far larger than the exterior could possibly contain. "Inside, quickly," she commanded. Marcus stumbled through the opening just as something crashed into his abandoned shelter with enough force to shake the ground. Looking back, he saw the shadow creatures swarming over the wreckage like ants, their forms seeming to absorb the light from his shelter's emergency systems. The interior of the crystal spire was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. The space was vast, far larger than the structure's exterior suggested, and filled with flowing patterns of light that moved along the walls like living circuitry. The air tasted different here, charged with energy that made his skin tingle. "Transport Nexus," Veltar explained, moving to what looked like a control interface grown from the same crystal as the walls. "This will carry us to the main defensive complex, but we must synchronize with the network before the scouts can disrupt the connection." Her fingers moved over the controls, and Marcus watched in fascination as the patterns of light responded to her touch. The entire chamber began to hum with barely contained energy. "How does it work?" he asked, then immediately felt foolish for asking. He was a geologist, not a physicist, and nothing about this situation fell within his expertise. "Quantum folding," Veltar replied absently, her attention focused on the controls. "The crystal network exists partially outside normal spacetime. We can travel vast distances by stepping through dimensional shortcuts." Marcus nodded, as if that explained anything. The babies in his arms had woken during their flight, and were now looking around with alert expressions that seemed far too intelligent for infants. One of them reached toward the moving lights on the walls, making soft sounds that almost resembled language. They recognized the technology, Veltar noted, glancing at the children with something like pride. The enhancements are already expressing themselves. By the time they reach adolescence, they will be able to interface with systems like this as naturally as you might operate a simple tool. The spire shuddered, and through its translucent walls Marcus could see the shadow creatures had discovered their location. They were pressing against the crystal structure, their forms seeming to flow like liquid shadow as they searched for a way inside. "Can I get in?" Marcus asked, backing away from the walls. "Not easily," one of Veltar's companions replied. "But they learn quickly. We should not delay." Veltar's manipulations of the control interface were becoming more complex, her movements faster and more precise. The chamber's humming grew louder, and Marcus felt a strange, tingling sensation, as if the air itself was becoming electrified. "Transport initialization complete," she announced. "Prepare for translation." "What should I?" Marcus began, but his words were cut off as the world exploded into light. For a moment that felt like eternity, Marcus existed in a space between spaces. He could see the crystal chamber, but it was overlaid with other images, vast networks of similar structures spanning continents, underground complexes that stretched for miles, and something massive and artificial at the planet's core that pulsed with the same blue energy that had transformed the surface. Then reality snapped back into focus, and they were elsewhere. The new chamber was similar to the first, but vastly larger. The walls curved away into distant shadows, and the ceiling was so high it disappeared into darkness. Flowing streams of light moved along every surface, creating patterns that seemed almost like writing in a language Marcus couldn't read. "Welcome to the Nexus," Veltar said, her voice carrying clearly despite the chamber's size. Marcus stepped carefully onto the new floor, still carrying the babies. The surface here felt more solid, though it still pulsed with that strange energy. All around them, the walls displayed what looked like tactical information, star maps, fleet positions, and symbols that might have been troop movements. "This is the command center?" he asked. "One of many," Veltar replied, leading them toward what appeared to be a raised platform in the center of the space. The Nexus extends deep into the planet's core and connects to similar installations throughout this galaxy. From here, we can coordinate defensive efforts across thousands of worlds. As they walked, Marcus began to notice other figures moving through the vast space. Some were clearly Ashari like Veltar, but others were different, beings he didn't recognize with varying anatomies and technologies. All of them moved with purpose, operating control interfaces, or consulting the displays that covered every available surface. "How many species are involved in this?" Marcus asked, staring at a creature that looked like it was made of living metal. 47 different civilizations have committed forces to the defense," Veltar replied. "Some, like the Ashari, have been preparing for centuries. Others learned of the Devourer threat only recently and joined the Alliance out of necessity." They reached the central platform, and Marcus saw that it was actually a sophisticated command center. Holographic displays showed real-time information from across the galaxy, fleet positions, colony status, and what appeared to be incoming threats marked in ominous red. "Sit," Veltar instructed, gesturing to a chair that seemed to grow from the platform's surface as she spoke. You need to understand what you and the children represent in this conflict. Marcus settled into the chair, which adjusted itself to his anatomy with disturbing precision. The baby seemed fascinated by the holographic displays, reaching toward them with small hands. The devourers are not like other predatory species, Veltar began, manipulating controls that cause the displays to shift and focus on specific regions of space. They do not simply destroy, they consume. They absorb the essence of what they defeat, learning from it, incorporating it into their own abilities. One of the displays showed what Marcus assumed was devourer territory, a vast region of space that appeared completely empty. No stars, no planets, no energy signatures of any kind. They have consumed entire galactic clusters this way, Veltar continued. Each victory makes them stronger, more adaptable, more dangerous. By the time they reach a new region, they have already absorbed the knowledge and capabilities of hundreds of defeated civilizations. But humanity is different, Marcus said, beginning to understand. Precisely. Your species has qualities that confuse them. The devourers understand overwhelming force, tactical superiority, and logical surrender when defeat is inevitable. They do not understand the human tendency to fight hardest when victory seems impossible. She gestured, and the displays shifted to show historical records, humans throughout their history facing impossible odds, and somehow prevailing. Battles where outnumbered forces achieved victory through stubbornness and ingenuity. Disasters where small groups of survivors accomplished seemingly impossible feats of endurance. We have been observing humanity for over 1,000 years, Veltar explained, waiting for the right moment to make contact. Your species' psychological profile suggests that humans perform best under extreme pressure, when conventional solutions have failed and only desperate improvisation remains. Marcus looked down at the babies in his arms. They had fallen asleep again, but even in sleep their faces showed an alertness that seemed beyond their apparent age. And the children? They combine human psychological resilience with enhancements that allow them to interface directly with our defensive systems. As they mature, they will be able to coordinate resistance efforts with a level of intuitive understanding that no other species could achieve. A new alarm tone filled the chamber, and the displays around them shifted to show incoming data. Marcus could see red markers appearing throughout the galaxy, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. The main force, one of Veltar's companions reported grimly. They have begun systematic insertion into this dimensional framework. Estimated time to full manifestation, 6 local days. 6 days. Marcus had spent over 2 years alone on what he thought was a dead world, and now he had 6 days to help coordinate the defense of the galaxy against cosmic predators. "What do you need me to do?" he asked, surprising himself with how steady his voice sounded. Veltar smiled, the first truly human-like expression he had seen from her. "Learn. The Nexus contains archives of human psychology and behavior patterns. You need to understand what makes your species unique and how that uniqueness can be weaponized against an enemy that has never faced anything like it." She gestured to another section of the platform, where a new interface was materializing from the floor. "The system will teach you to recognize and coordinate human resistance patterns. More importantly, it will help you understand what the children will become as they mature." Marcus stood carefully, still holding the babies. Around them, the Nexus hummed with activity as dozens of species prepared for a war that could determine the fate of the galaxy. For the first time since the Meridian crashed, Marcus felt something he had thought was lost forever: purpose. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was preparing to fight for the continuation of everything he held dear. The children in his arms stirred slightly, as if sensing his change of mood. When one of them opened dark eyes to look at him, Marcus could have sworn he saw approval in that ancient gaze. "Show me what I need to learn," he said to Veltar. The real education was about to begin. The learning interface that grew from the Nexus floor resembled nothing Marcus had ever seen on Earth. It formed a perfect sphere around him and the children, its surface displaying streams of information that seemed to flow directly into his consciousness rather than through his eyes. Human psychological warfare patterns, Veltar explained, her voice coming from everywhere and nowhere within the sphere. Your species has an unusual relationship with hopelessness. Where other intelligent races surrender when defeat becomes statistically certain, humans often become more dangerous. Images flooded Marcus's awareness. Historical battles where human forces had achieved impossible victories through sheer refusal to accept defeat. But these weren't just Earth's battles. The sphere showed him conflicts across human space that he had never heard of, colonies that had faced extinction and somehow found ways to survive. We've been watching longer than I realized, Marcus said, amazed by the scope of the records. Your expansion into space has been monitored since your first primitive satellites, Veltar confirmed. Every colony world, every exploration mission, every desperate last stand against impossible odds. The data suggests that human effectiveness increases proportionally with the hopelessness of the situation. The sphere's display shifted to show psychological profiles, charts, and graphs that mapped human behavior under extreme stress. Marcus was startled to see his own survival on this world represented in the data, his daily routines, and mental adaptations analyzed with scientific precision. You studied me specifically? You were perfect test subject, Veltar replied. Isolated, facing certain death, with no realistic hope of rescue. By all logical measures, you should have either gone insane or committed suicide within the first year. Instead, you established routines, maintained sanity through sheer determination, and continued to function at near-optimal levels. Marcus felt a chill as he realized the implications. You could have rescued me at any time. You let me suffer alone for over 2 years just to see what I would do. The knowledge we gain may save billions of lives, Veltar said, her tone carrying something that might have been regret. Human endurance under hopeless conditions is key to understanding how your species can be most effectively deployed against the devourers. The babies in his arms stirred, and Marcus noticed that they seemed to be responding to the information flowing around them. Their eyes tracked the moving displays with obvious intelligence, and one of them reached toward a particularly complex diagram showing fleet deployment patterns. They're absorbing this too, he realized. Their enhancement allows rapid learning integration, Veltar confirmed. What takes you hours to understand, they process in minutes. By the time they reach physical maturity, they will have absorbed tactical and strategic knowledge from hundreds of civilizations. How long until they're mature enough to actually help? The sphere's display shifted again, showing biological development charts that made Marcus's head spin. The children's growth patterns were unlike anything in human biology, accelerated but not crude, enhanced but still recognizably human. 18 months, Veltar replied. Their development has been optimized for rapid maturation while maintaining psychological stability. They will retain human creativity and adaptability while gaining the processing speed necessary to coordinate galactic defense networks. 18 months. Marcus tried to imagine caring for rapidly growing children who would soon possess capabilities beyond any normal human while preparing for a war against cosmic predators. The responsibility was staggering. The learning session continued for what felt like hours. Marcus absorbed information about devourer tactics, multi-species coordination protocols, and the technical specifications of weapons and defensive systems he could barely comprehend. Through it all, the babies remained alert and responsive, their enhanced minds apparently processing the same information with far greater efficiency than his own. When the sphere finally dissolved, Marcus felt mentally exhausted but also exhilarated. For the first time since the Meridian crashed, he truly understood his place in something larger than mere survival. The first wave arrives in 4 days, Veltar announced, consulting displays that showed updated tactical information. Preliminary scout forces are already engaging outer system defenses in 3 sectors. The main assault will follow standard devourer doctrine. Overwhelming force applied to critical points until resistance collapses. Marcus studied the tactical displays, trying to apply his newly gained knowledge to the unfolding situation. The red markers indicating enemy forces covered vast regions of space, their numbers incomprehensible. How do we fight something this large? We don't fight them directly, Veltar replied. Conventional military confrontation against the Devourers is futile. They have absorbed the tactical knowledge of too many conquered species. Instead, we force them to adapt to something they have never encountered before. She manipulated the controls, and the displays shifted to show detailed plans that made Marcus's newly educated mind reel with their audacity. Asymmetric resistance, he said, understanding dawning. Instead of meeting their strengths, we hit them with unpredictability. Human unpredictability specifically, Veltar confirmed. Your species' talent for desperate improvisation, for finding solutions that shouldn't work but do anyway. The Devourers have encountered species that fight logically, efficiently, and predictably. They have never faced enemies who deliberately choose tactics that violate strategic common sense. One of the displays showed planned human deployment across the galaxy. Small teams integrated into larger defensive forces, positioned not at the strongest points, but at the most unpredictable ones. Suicide mission Marcus réalised. Missions with extremely low survival probability, Veltar corrected. The difference is that humans have a documented tendency to achieve objectives even under such conditions, often through methods that confuse enemy analysis. Marcus looked down at the children in his arms. They would grow up in the middle of this galactic war, their enhanced minds shaped by conflict and desperate necessity. The thought should have horrified him, but instead he felt a strange pride. What's my specific role in this? You will coordinate human resistance elements from here in the Nexus, Veltar explained. Your psychological profile matches that of the most effective human leaders under extreme stress. Combined with the tactical knowledge you are absorbing, you should be able to direct human forces in ways that maximize their disruptive potential. A new alarm tone filled the chamber, different from the others Marcus had heard. Around them, the various alien species became more active, their movements taking on urgent purpose. What's happening? Marcus asked. Enemy contact, one of Veltar's companions reported. Forward scouts have engaged Devourer advance elements in the Kepler system. They're probing our defenses. The displays around them exploded with real-time combat data. Marcus watched in fascination and horror as symbols representing ships and creatures moved through three-dimensional space, exchanging fire and maneuvering for advantage. The enemy adapts quickly, Veltar observed, studying the tactical feed. They are already modifying their approach based on initial encounters with our forces. Marcus could see it happening, the Devourer formations shifting their patterns, adjusting their tactics as they learned from each exchange. Their ability to adapt in real time was terrifying. How long before they figure out what we're really planning? He asked. Unknown, Veltar replied honestly. Possibly days, possibly hours. The Devourer's learning rate appears to have increased since their last major campaign. They may have absorbed capabilities we do not yet understand. One of the babies in Marcus's arms made a soft sound, drawing his attention. The child was staring at the tactical displays with obvious intelligence, her small hand reaching towards specific patterns in the enemy movement data. She sees something, Marcus said, following her gaze. Veltar moved closer, studying the child's focus. Their enhanced pattern recognition is already active. What does she perceive? Marcus held the baby closer to the display, watching her reaction. Her attention was fixed on a specific region of the battle space, where Devourer forces seemed to be clustering around something not visible on the tactical readouts. There's something there, Marcus said, sudden understanding flooding through him. Something the sensors aren't picking up, but she could see it somehow. Veltar's fingers flew over the control interface, focusing scanners on the region the child was indicating. For a moment, nothing appeared. Then, energy signatures began resolving on the display, massive structures that had been completely invisible to their sensors. Klopt command ships, Veltar breed. Far larger than anything in our intelligence reports. The Devourers have capabilities we never suspected. The implications were staggering. If the enemy possessed stealth technology that could hide ships of that size, everything they thought they knew about Devourer fleet strength was wrong. Sound General Alert, Veltar ordered. All defense coordinators need to see this data immediately. As alarms echoed through the Nexus, Marcus looked down at the child who had just potentially saved countless lives by spotting something no adult had noticed. Her eyes met his with that same ancient intelligence, and he realized that the war for the galaxy had already begun, and humanity's most important weapons were not ships or guns, but the impossible children sleeping in his arms. For days, he murmured, watching the tactical situation evolve in real time. In 4 days, the fate of everything would be decided, and somehow the crashed geologist and 2 enhanced infants would be at the center of it all. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity could do when everything depended on refusing to accept defeat. The final battle began exactly as Veltar had predicted, with overwhelming force applied to critical points across the galaxy. Marcus watched from the Nexus Command Center as red markers flooded the tactical displays, representing Devourer fleets emerging from dimensional rifts in numbers that defied comprehension. 17 primary incursion points, the tactical coordinator reported, his crystalline form shifting colors to indicate extreme stress. Enemy fleet strength exceeding all projections by factor of 12. Marcus held the children closer, though in the 3 days since his arrival at the Nexus, they had grown with shocking speed. What had been infants were now the size of 6-month-old babies, their enhanced development allowing them to sit up and take solid food. More importantly, their ability to perceive patterns in the tactical data had proven invaluable. Human resistance cells are in position, Marcus asked, checking his own command interface. The past 3 days had been a crash course in galactic military coordination, his brain pushed to its limits by alien teaching systems. Affirmative, Veltar replied. 237 teams deployed across 41 systems, each cell equipped with quantum communicators and authorized for maximum tactical discretion. Maximum tactical discretion. In practical terms, that meant human teams were authorized to attempt anything they thought might work, regardless of how insane it seemed to conventional military thinking. The first reports came in within minutes of the Devourer's main assault beginning. Human teams engaging enemy forces in ways that violated every principle of strategic warfare, attacking superior forces head-on, splitting up when they should concentrate, retreating toward enemy positions instead of away from them. It should have been disasters. Instead, the results were chaos in the Devourer ranks. Enemy Fleet 7-7 experiencing command disruption, the tactical coordinator announced, his form cycling through colors of confusion. Human team designation Forlorn Hope has somehow infiltrated their flagship and is broadcasting Earth music on all frequencies. Marcus checked the battle feed and laughed despite himself. The human team had indeed penetrated the Devourer command ship, but instead of attempting sabotage or gathering intelligence, they were playing loud, aggressive music that apparently disrupted the enemy's neural network communications. It's working, he realized. The Devourers don't know how to respond to completely irrational tactics. Another report. Human Cell lost cause as engaged enemy ground forces by constructing what appears to be a massive sculpture out of wrecked vehicles. Enemy advance has halted while they attempt to determine its tactical significance. There is no tactical significance, Veltar observed, studying the data. That is precisely why it is effective. The children in Marcus's arms were watching the displays with obvious fascination. The girl, Marcus had started thinking of her as Elena, though he wasn't sure where the name came from, pointed toward a specific section of the battle space where Devourer forces were massing for what looked like a coordinated assault. She sees something again, Marcus reported. Veltar activated enhanced scanners on the indicated region. This time, they immediately detected what the child had spotted, a massive energy buildup that suggested the Devourers were preparing to deploy some kind of superweapon. Planet Killer class weapon, the tactical coordinator confirmed. Charging sequence initiated. Target appears to be the Rigel colony cluster. Rigel held nearly 2 billion human colonists. If the Devourers succeeded in deploying their superweapon there, it would be the single largest loss of human life in the species' history. Nearest human resistance cell? Marcus asked, his mind racing through possibilities. Team designation, Forlorn Faith, currently engaged in diversionary action 3 light hours away. Veltar replied. Insufficient time to redirect for intervention. Marcus studied the tactical situation, applying everything he had learned about human psychology and devourer behavior patterns. The superweapon was positioned in the center of a massive fleet formation, protected by layers of defensive screens and escort vessels. Any conventional attack would be detected and destroyed long before it could reach the target. But humans didn't fight conventionally. Open a channel to Forlorn Faith, Marcus ordered. The communication established almost instantly, despite the vast distances involved. The voice that answered was female, young, and completely calm despite the sounds of weapons fire in the background. Forlorn Faith Actual, this is Commander Sarah Mitchell. Currently having a lovely time introducing Devourer ground forces to the concept of guerrilla theater. What can we do for you? Sarah, this is Marcus Chun at Nexus Command. I need you to do something that's going to sound completely insane. My favorite kind of mission, Sarah replied without hesitation. What did you have in mind? Marcus explained the situation and his plan, watching Veltar's expression grow more incredulous with each detail. When he finished, there was a long pause before Sarah responded. You want us to surrender to the Devourers, convince them to take us to their super weapon platform, and then improvise. That's the basic idea, Marcus confirmed. I love it, Sarah said cheerfully. It's so stupid it just might work. Give us 20 minutes to set up the performance. The channel closed, and Veltar stared at Marcus with something approaching awe. You just ordered a human team to deliberately get captured by the enemy and trust their ability to improvise a solution once they're aboard the most heavily defended platform in the Devourer fleet. It's what humans do best, Marcus replied. We specialize in impossible situations. 23 minutes later, Forlorn Faith began their performance. They approached the Devourer super weapon platform under a flag of truce, claiming to be a high-value human command element willing to negotiate surrender terms. The Devourers, curious about this unprecedented development, took the bait. Marcus watched through quantum-linked sensors as the 6-person human team was brought aboard the massive weapon platform. Sarah Mitchell and her people were escorted to what appeared to be an interrogation chamber, surrounded by dozens of Devourer warriors. What happened next would be discussed in military academies for centuries. Instead of answering questions about human defenses or command structures, Forlorn Faith began performing what could only be described as interpretive dance. Not just any interpretive dance, a deliberately confusing artistic interpretation of human emotional responses to cosmic horror. The Devourers were baffled. They had absorbed the knowledge of hundreds of conquered species, but none of their accumulated experience provided any context for understanding what they were witnessing. Are they attempting to communicate strategic information through physical movement? One Devourer queried. Unknown, another replied. The patterns appear random, but may contain hidden meaning. Perhaps it is a primitive human ritual intended to invoke supernatural protection, a third suggested. While the Devourers struggled to analyze the inexplicable performance, Sarah Mitchell and her team were slowly working their way closer to the weapon platform's control systems. Their bizarre dance routine provided perfect cover for reconnaissance and positioning. Weapon charging at 60%, the tactical coordinator reported. Time to target, 17 minutes. Marcus held his breath as he watched the human team continue their absurd performance. They were now close enough to the control systems to attempt sabotage, but still surrounded by enemy forces. Then, Sarah did something that even Marcus hadn't anticipated. Instead of trying to damage the weapon systems, she began incorporating them into the dance routine. Her team started touching control surfaces, activating displays, and manipulating the weapon's targeting parameters, all while maintaining their artistic performance. What is she doing? Veltar asked. Marcus studied the data feeds, and began to laugh. She's not sabotaging the weapon. She's retargeting it. The Devourers remained completely focused on trying to decode the supposed meaning behind the human's dance, never realizing that their super weapon was slowly being redirected. Instead of targeting the Rigel colonies, the massive energy beam was now aimed at the Devourer fleet's own command cluster. Weapon charging at 90%, the coordinator announced. "Forlorn Faith, this is Nexus Command," Marcus called. "You need to get out of there." "Working on it," Sarah replied, her voice calm despite the circumstances. "Just putting the finishing touches on our masterpiece." With perfect timing, the human team concluded their performance with a flourish. Sarah's final dance move pressed the weapon's firing control. The Planet Killer weapon discharged its full power directly into the heart of the Devourer fleet. The explosion was visible across 3-star systems as dozens of enemy capital ships were vaporized instantly. In the confusion that followed, Forlorn Faith escaped in captured Devourer shuttles, somehow managing to rescue 17 other human prisoners in the process. "Impossible," the tactical coordinator stated, his crystalline form cycling through colors of amazement. "No species has ever successfully turned Devourer super weapons against their own forces. The enemy fleet is in complete disarray," Veltar reported, studying the tactical displays with obvious admiration. "They cannot comprehend how their own weapon was used against them. Command and control networks are failing as they attempt to analyze what they witnessed." Marcus looked down at the children in his arms. Elena was watching the displays with obvious approval, while her brother, Marcus had started calling him David, was reaching toward new tactical patterns that were forming as human resistance cells across the galaxy adapted the same impossible tactics. "This is just the beginning," Marcus realized. "The Devourers have never faced enemies who deliberately choose tactics that make no sense. Every victory teaches them the wrong lessons because they're trying to apply logic to deliberately illogical behavior." Over the following hours, the pattern repeated across dozens of battle zones. Human teams achieved impossible objectives through methods that defied every principle of military strategy. They convinced enemy forces to surrender by staging elaborate philosophical debates. They captured enemy ships by flooding them with confusing radio broadcasts. They disrupted command networks by teaching Devourer AI systems to appreciate abstract art. None of it should have worked. All of it was completely effective. "The Devourers are withdrawing," Veltar announced as the tactical displays showed red markers beginning to fade. "Their fleets are retreating to dimensional rifts. They appear to be confused." Marcus watched the impossible victory unfold, holding 2 enhanced children who had helped coordinate the defense of the galaxy through their ability to see patterns that no one else could detect. Around them, the Nexus hummed with activity as species throughout the galaxy began to understand what had just happened. Humanity had defeated cosmic predators not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but by being so fundamentally unpredictable that their enemies couldn't adapt. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "Now," Veltar replied, "the galaxy learns that sometimes the best strategy is to have no strategy at all. And these children will grow up in a universe that has learned to value human unpredictability as its greatest defense against the unknown." Elena gurgled happily in his arms, her enhanced mind already processing the implications of what they had achieved. David pointed toward the displays, showing celebration across 100 worlds, as if he understood that he and his sister would spend their lives ensuring that such victories remained possible. Marcus Chun, geologist, sole survivor of the Meridian, and inadvertent coordinator of galactic defense, looked out at the stars and smiled. After 873 days of solitude, he had found his purpose, and it was more important than anything he had ever imagined possible. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly what humanity did best, changing everything by refusing to accept that anything was impossible.